All right, welcome in everybody. My name is Letiredd, content creator over on Twitch. I mainly stream Star Citizen, but sometimes I dabble in other things. Today we are doing another react on Inside Star Citizen Alpha 4.0 Conflict Resolution. Let's see what they have to tell us today. Hopefully it's as surprising as the facts we got live yesterday.
What's the word I'm thinking of?
Murderous.
It's not. It's like it's not like, you don't want to say immersive, but it's visceral is probably a bit too much of a big word. It's like, I'm thinking engaging, I suppose.
Tell us what you really think of the backers.
I suppose engaging is the word, right? Like, you're going to get a much more like engaging
You hear this?
experience.
He doesn't think you know the word visceral, people.
Well, it's a lot of syllables for a bloke from Coventry. We have a 2-syllable cat where I'm from.
That's hilarious. All right. Okay, so what's this about? Is this PvP oriented? Let's see. Kill the music. Sorry about that. All right, let's do this.
As the Pyro star system is lawless, this means that combat can break out anywhere. Social spaces can turn into combat spaces in the blink of an eye.
The main experience we're trying to build is something that feels a bit more like wild and not the typical thing that you've seen in Stanton. So the themes are a bit more chaotic than you'd expect. So for example, if you're shopping and then someone decides to take a firefight with you because they think your armor's cool and they want it, you can jump over that kiosk, sit behind that cover and return fire. So you're basically turning this shopping mall, which you were at previously, into a combat zone.
These spaces were built modularly with various different overlays that had to stitch together, but also make sure that it accounted for a fair combat fight and easy navigation for both vehicles and any other light elements that you want to be able to bring to these places. As for the trade posts, because of their ever-shifting inventory of things they could sell, could buy, things being on display, this changes the layout of the trade post itself.
Taking everyday objects in the trading post, like weapon terminals, something that you would purchase, would then, as soon as a fight is initiated, that becomes cover. You would be using these things to help yourself to not get shot by the enemy, essentially.
So you could be ducking behind cover behind a ship component that you want to purchase for your ship later, but first you've got to take care of this rival gang attacking you. Then afterwards, you can decide, hey, I need to grab a multi-tool for this other salvage mission I need to go to. So after the firefight is finished, you go to the counter, pick up your multi-tool with a salvage component, pay for it, chip's done, and off you head out.
Taking what we've learned and these setups from Squadron 42 to Pyro, for example, NPCs having specific archetypes and having more specific classes, using things like defend areas and keeping NPCs in specific areas. Pyro, we're taking that to the next level, where we're having more specific areas used for defenses and things like that, and making areas stay in NPCs. We're also using something...
This is interesting because it's something that I want a lot, but I'm wondering how fun and enjoyable these things are going to be when you're trying to do something against NPCs and all of a sudden you've got an A2 come in and just destroy everything you were doing. It's probably going to be very frustrating for certain people. It does seem like a Nova is going to be a necessary accessory.
Called schedule areas, which basically enforces NPCs to stay within a certain vicinity in combat. For 4.0, with server meshing, we expect higher server frame rates, so the idea is that you'll get a much more engaging AI experience.
I love how he said, we expect higher frame rates. That does not necessarily mean that's what we're going to get.
Let's talk about some of those classes.
Exactly.
We have what we call our techie, which typically features light armor and SMGs, and they have more aggressive traits, so they're focused on getting close to you and flushing you out. Similar with our CQC class, which typically has shotguns, and obviously they have the much higher aggression version. You've seen us talk about traits at CitizenCon, and this is putting that work in the persistent universe and allowing us to create more dynamic situations. We're doing other things as well. For example, we're making NPCs hold up in rooms with shotguns and things like that. So when you have to eliminate a specific target and you're going into a room, those guys are specifically holding up there, and you're kind of having a tug of war of them in close quarters environments versus them just kind of walking around the area. With our Juggernaut enemy.
Okay, that last room didn't look that hard to clear. It looked like the AI was a little dumb. These guys are annoying because they can take so many hits.
You'll have seen that. That's the incredibly highly healthed LMG enemy, which ignores all shooting restrictions, can focus on pushing the player and shooting them out, and basically being that slow-moving target that walks towards you. Similar, including things like Copions into battle. One of the factions has pet Copions, and Copions fight alongside them, and that is fantastic because it gives you a different silhouette when you're fighting these factions.
That's a really good point. I was thinking about that. You're going to actually have a true use for grenades now. You're going to clear rooms with grenades and grenade launchers. Like, that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to all of this. But it sounds like it might be a highly frustrating experience.
You know, you have to shoot a lot lower, you have to be a lot more conscious because they're a lot quicker than a human being, and just these nice little new additions to combat. We're integrating more things in terms of having people who are more aggressive, having different factions, having different accuracy profiles, and making the factions in Pyro feeling a bit more versatile and different to when you fight each other. These encounters are a lot more crafted and bespoke. Pyro is a system of conflict, and in there's many factions vying over control. When you arrive at Pyro, one of the first things you want to do is enlist one of the two primary factions. The Headhunters have more tiered structured armor, which you can acquire. The more higher tiered the armor is, the more tanky and resistant those enemies are.
As a headhunter, you might be hovering around the Sunset Mesa, trying to think of how you're going to get close by. You would land your ship under the cover of darkness. You're taking your ground vehicle to the outpost. You're then getting out, trying to sneak past the outer perimeter, and eventually navigating your way down to either the gas tanks or to the main landing pit itself, and finding the exact critical point that would break the entire operation at the scrapyard.
Okay, they're going to have to elaborate on that, but that does sound pretty cool. Now, I don't know how much of the gameplay is actually going to be stealth. I feel like people are just going to come and blast in. At least I will. But some of this gear looks really dope. Like that Mohawk skull helmet thing looks pretty cool. Yeah, exactly. Like certain things are just not made for sneakiness, you know. If you come in a hammerhead, you're not gonna be sneaky. Everyone's gonna open up.
Citizens of Prosperity have much higher and deadly accuracy. They also have more civil weaponry versus criminal weaponry as well, so you'll see things more like bearings and so on and so forth, versus other more lawless factions which typically have things like Castak arms.
If you're aligned with the Citizens for Prosperity, you might be given a mission to go to Rustville and actually head down into the canyons and try to steal some of their scrap from their derelict ships in the base of the canyons. Because of Pyro 1's unique terrain where Rustville is located, you will need to get into your ground vehicle.
That looks interesting. Now, I don't know how much of the hand salvaging we're actually going to do because I don't know how much money you're going to make off of it. But if you're stranded somewhere and need to make a little bit of quick cash and you can salvage some stuff and sell it, that could be fun. It could be cool. A little extra thing you can do. I like that. The whole sneakiness part, I'm not convinced about. But yes, the Space AC-130, the Hammerhead, is. I mean, this all sounds like just a bunch of places where you're just going to be going around in a group. If you're playing solo, you're probably in Stanton. And if you're playing with a group, you're in Pyro, going to an extraction zone or contested zone, sorry, or doing an asteroid base or, something like that. I really do hope they add some asteroid bases to Stanton. That would be good. I think it's necessary for the game, so we'll see. But so far from what we're seeing, this all looks very cool, but I'm kind of just worried about the possibility or how likely it'll be that other players come and gank you, because here's the reality is the second one of these missions becomes super profitable, either from reward that is like a physical reward, so saying you have to pick up cargo or something, or let's say the gear that these guys drop, or potential loot at these locations, well, the chances of you running into somebody are incredibly high. Ghost Hollow, yeah, Jump Town, Ghost Hollow, all the whatchamacallit. But the only true contested zone, yeah, is Ghost Hollow. But even that payout isn't that good because you spend an hour there. Let's say you're solo, you make maximum 300k, and that's assuming nobody shows up and you kill all the NPCs. I'm not convinced.
Again, navigate through all the twisting canyons and ravines and use your multi-tool to steal as much scrap as possible to end up sabotaging the unlimited supply of scrap that the headhunters at Rustville have got.
So regardless if you side with headhunters or Citizens of Prosperity, you'll both be able to fight the Letiredd.
These hate everybody. They are operating out of Pyro 2, 3, and Pyro 6.
The Letiredd is more what you'd think of as a PMC in terms of how you fight them and how they behave. They're a lot more cautious, they're a lot more careful, they won't try rush you out of cover, they play a lot more defensively. And we can use our trait system to inform how they make combat decisions. So where you'd expect someone like the Headhunters to be a bit more, run at you, push you out, the Letiredd characters will be a lot more cautious and stationary and prefer to stay in cover and take long shots. And they'll have a much higher accuracy profile, but they'll shoot for much shorter durations, so they conserve their ammo a lot more.
A place we're going to...
Okay, I'm guessing the two factions are really going to be Headhunters and Xeno. I thought the Dusters were going to be there. I guess not. I feel like I'm going to end up siding with Headhunters, because screw Xeno.
The fight Xenothreat is at the Last Ditch settlement on Pyro 2. Last Ditch is another large, lawless settlement.
We have a town close by it, and then different mining operations between the village and the mining tower.
And it's kind of a callback to the history of the system, where there was once these mega corporations in Pyro that would do these large-scale mining operations.
It's a vital part in the Pyro ecosystem for these outlaw gangs to control. So we can also see here that there is fortifications, but they're mainly around the village from which these gangs operate.
But interestingly, it's almost built on 3 levels. There's like a main habitation area on top of this bluff, and then just down from that is the refinery area. And then right at the base of the super large mega mining structure is a small sort of extraction area in an old kind of quarry. Should make for some very interesting fights, especially as you move between those sort of 3 sub-locations within the larger location.
I hope that the player will get a sense of trying to stop Xenothreat with their evil deeds.
Exactly.
Shadowfall is another Xenothreat outpost. It's quite a large Xenothreat outpost that lives in the shadow of this mountain on Pyro 3 and kind of just sits on the shore of this lake.
This location hits different. It's a location just like the outlaw locations, but we can feel that things have been turned up further. It is not only is it chaos, but it is now a structured chaos.
There's fire and there's these spiked barricades that make up the place around it.
Within the homestead location, we have a lot of elevated positions that the player will look to. We'll see that there is a lot of scaffolding build-up, and it feels like a fortified position.
So in 3.23, we added sniper NPCs to the distribution centers. In 4.0, we're going further on that and adding specific watch nests and things like that.
Yeah, by the way, if you don't know this, the distribution center snipers are usually always in the same spot. They don't ever really count towards a mission or a contract that you would take there. And they haven't really been a threat to me. Ever. Unless I go attack them. But they're not going to snipe you from up above. At least that has not been my experience.
Like that to keep these snipers in. So you'll have to be careful and keep an eye on for these outposts and these high elevation where snipers could essentially hit you from. How we're validating combat is ensuring that the players can have a lot more stealthy approach, have a lot more overview of what their targets are doing and where they're going.
So you could use elevation to plan things out, such things as a comms tower, such things as cliff edges. You can basically survey over the trade post or the outpost itself. You can look at key things. Does it have automated weapon systems there? Does it have primary, secondary, and tertiary pathing to allow the player in?
It's all about defensive structures, about obstructing the player in order to get to its objective, with a lot of anti-air turrets littered around the location.
You are going to need to use your aerial support to take out these defensive measures so that you can even get people close to the location. Eventually, you can pull in your ground vehicles, drop off an elite squad. You can stealth through the scrapyard, you can stealth via the nearby lake, come through the derelict outpost section, finally clearing out Xeno threat once and for all.
Well, until they come back.
Finally, that looks like a ton of fun. Yes. But again, what's to stop players from just flying overhead with an A2 and, you know.
From another outpost.
It's definitely a place that will just feel very hostile to the player. And you feel like this is a location that has a purpose within the universe and that it's important for these outlaw gangs to protect what they have going right here.
In 4.0, you can expect a lot more crafted, engaging combat experiences, with new archetypes, enemies using new weapons, fighting animals alongside humans, and all sorts of absolute crazy that you expect from Pyro.
Eradicate.
Hey,
All right, Bosch.
That's hilarious.
well, what more can I add? We always knew there'd be a lot of combat in Pyro, but with the addition of more AI archetypes from Squadron and the anticipated performance improvements generated by server meshing, we're
Anticipated performance improvements. It's the second or third time we've heard this. We expect, we anticipate. I mean, but at the same time, to be fair, they're creating this technology, even though it does exist in certain forms, not in the way they've been doing it. And it takes time, sure. They have to create it. They probably don't know what's to expect in terms of results. So, yeah, theoretically, but I thought already theoretically the replication layer was supposed to up frames, which I feel like it has. I feel like there's been a 10 to 20 FPS boost kind of across the board in Star Citizen recently. Last night I was getting 80 to 100 FPS just running around anywhere. The only times I had lower frames was in stations, and that was like 40, 50. So it was really not bad. Let's see what else we have to say. They're not broken. They're just moving on.
hoping to deliver an experience that's more dangerous, engaging, and heck, I'm not from Coventry, so I can say it, visceral for our players. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thanks for letting us share the people and process of game development with you. And we'll see you all here next week for a look at characters and creatures in 4.0.
Funnies? 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 Damn it. Getting screwed on the funnies. Always. All right, so what did we learn? Well, we learned that we're going to have not necessarily different mission types, but the missions are going to happen or flow differently because of just the location setups. The new archetypes is actually really interesting to hear about and how the AI are going to interact differently. I mean, we already feel that to a certain extent. Now in the verse, certain people are going to push you, others are going to keep their distance, but that's kind of the only two traits they have right now. So that'll be really interesting to see these archetypes come in. You know, I'm going to say one more time, just underlining the fact that they repeatedly said expected, anticipated FPS and server improvement. I do truly hope that's the case. I feel like that's one of the main justifications for them taking this long to build these systems for server meshing. However, I think, again, we have to scale back our expectations, and we should not expect anything that's really fleshed out when it first comes out. I think this is another one of those patches that's probably going to live in Evocati and PTU at least a month, if not 2, and why not 3? I mean, this is probably going to be the biggest patch ever done to Star Citizen just because of server meshing, not even counting the fact that we're adding a system, all these planets, all these moons, all these asteroid bases, all these space stations, all this stuff. So it was nice for them to kind of show us the context and how these engagements are going to happen, but we didn't see much about player-to-player engagement. Although they did say at the very beginning, you know, you could be buying something at a trader outpost and somebody could show up, say, I like the stuff you've got in your ship, or that's a really cool helmet you've got on there, give me that, and you guys can break out into a fight. That will be interesting, and I think whether that's successful or not kind of depends on the player base and how toxic we feel like being. Because if the toxic ones decide to use that to advantage, other people are just going to get frustrated. It's normal. Uh, and if people don't feel the need to go there for any PvP gameplay, well, then it's not going to be as fun either because, well, there's not the same, stakes for being there. So I don't know. We'll see how this goes. It'll be interesting. I want to say thank you all for joining me and watching my react. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Do. I mean, that's a very real risk, Shaky, which I always am down to give benefit of the doubt. However, I'm not dumb. I don't necessarily think that's the case. So like I said, it's going to depend on the players and what they decide to do with it. There doesn't seem to be enough AA when someone can just hover over a location with a ship and just pick off infantry like the retrieval ops. So I think one of the reasons why we see not that much anti-aircraft is probably because of server load and what it means for them. And we already see just around space stations, which has a ton of AA, doesn't always work that great. Oh, absolutely. Now, one of the reasons why I'm in Star Citizen is because there's a smaller percentage of them compared to many other games. And that's one of the appeals of Star Citizen to me, and I'm sure to many others. We hope they stay away for the most part. And as long as we can keep a majority of cool, decent people who just want to enjoy themselves, and that doesn't mean people who are all Care Bears or Bobs or whatever. No, absolutely not. I'm not a Care Bear. I'm somewhat of a Bob, but I like to dabble and I like to do a little bit of everything. And I don't think shutting off the PvP door is the way to go. I don't think making everything revolved around PvP is the way to go either, because I look at games like Tarkov and that's what killed that game for me. And that's why most players have gone over to PvE and don't play in the PvP as much. Although right now with the wipe, that's a little different, but it'll go back to being majority of people in PvE again. That being said, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider leaving a like and subscribe. If you didn't, well, thanks for hanging out this long, and hopefully you enjoy the next one. Put these out usually every Friday on YouTube, and we stream this live on Thursdays on Twitch. So make sure to check me out. And thanks again, everybody. I'll see you on the next one.